We are so glad that you're here tonight, and I'm thinking most of you are here this morning, so you've already heard Steve. But in case you weren't, I thought I would just do a really brief introduction. Steve goes around talking about Jesus. So he spends most of his waking hours looking for opportunities to share Christ, sometimes with Christians and sometimes with people that are struggling, people that have questions, and people that don't even know. And so he's always looking for opportunities. So we thought we'd come. We'd invite him to come, and here's an opportunity for him again to share Christ. So come on up here. We'll have a prayer as we hear this lesson, and it's going to be really good. So, dear God, be with Steve as he speaks to us, and may you work through him. May the words of his mouth and the meditation of his heart be acceptable to you. But may we also have ears and hearts that are open to hear your message, that we may understand it and apply it, and that your love and your grace will touch us even tonight. In Christ's name, amen.
Well, if you grow up as a really short guy, you really like to stand way up here because you feel like everybody's looking up. And I'm short. Nobody's ever looked up to me except my dog. And if she rears up on my shoulders, she looks down on me. But I'm going to come down here anyhow because I just want to be a little closer to you guys, you know. So I had a story I was going to start tonight with and tell you a story about someone from Abilene. But I got news this afternoon that has made me change which story I'm going to tell. I don't know how it's going to work out because the story I was going to tell was going to flow right in the lesson, and the one I'm now going to tell you tonight was for tomorrow night. So I don't know how it's all going to work, but I just am so excited about this story. I've got to tell you. But before I tell you what fired me up about tonight, I want to back up and tell you about John's story. John grew up and, like a lot of young people, experimented with alcohol and liked it. Liked it so much that he drank a lot. When you drink a lot, sometimes you lose control of things, and occasionally things happen that involve you with the authorities. And if it's bad enough, you end up in court. And if it doesn't go the way you hope, you end up in jail. John ended up in jail. John got really depressed when he was in prison, didn't take care of himself, and long story short, John had a stroke in prison. And they told him, the prison doctors rushed him to a hospital, said, we think we can save your motor skills on your right side, but we have to do some brain surgery. He said, I don't want it. I refuse. I won't sign for the surgery. He will tell you now he really wasn't in his right mind. Most of us know he was so depressed about his life. He was done. He said, refuse the surgery. And so John is paralyzed on his right side. So he has to walk like this. And it takes him a long time to get anywhere. He eventually got out of prison, was put on probation, got his ankle bracelet like you do in Texas. I guess they do that up here. When you get on probation, you get ankle bracelets. Okay, I thought some of y'all might say, yes, look. And that'd be okay. Hey, we tell people all the time at Hillcrest when they say, does it bother you if I have an ankle bracelet? We're like, yes, we have 6 of them right over here. So John gets out, and he tried a couple of towns in Texas when he got released. And he said they weren't good for him. He couldn't stay away from his previous life. And he'd say, I never intended to drink, but he said, if we're sitting at a barbecue and somebody's got a bottle of beer and I take one, he said, I take a sip, and he said, 3 days later, I try to figure out what in the world happened. Now, if you've ever had an addiction, you get that. You do. So John eventually relocated to Abilene. One of our members at Hillcrest was doing a Bible study at the halfway house that John ended up at. One day, John said, I was just kind of bored, and I thought, why not? And he went to the Bible study, and he liked it. And our member said, listen, we do a class on Wednesday night for people that are trying to figure out the Jesus journey. If I pick you up, will you come? John said, well, sure, why not? And so John started coming on Wednesday night, started picking him up for church on Sunday morning. Now, the problem was sometimes John overslept. And in halfway houses, a lot of times you're careful with your phone because you just don't want to leave it anywhere, so you kind of hide it. And when you hide your phone, you don't hear it ring sometimes. And so John would show up, and John would be asleep, and we'd wake him up. And then if we helped him, we could get him dressed in about 15 minutes. And so Halfway through class, here'd come John. And halfway through church, here'd come John. But he kept coming. One day, the guy that was doing the Bible study, he said, you know what? I'm really interested in this Jesus thing. What do I need to do if I decided to follow him? So he said, well, all this time we've talked about being born again and dying with Jesus, being buried in baptism, raised to a new life. And John said, I don't think I can do that. Now, when he first said that, here's what we all thought. In fact, when he talked to me, here's what I thought he was saying. I just don't know if I can make that kind of commitment. And finally, I said, John, I can tell you're interested in Jesus. Why won't you just commit to being baptized? He said, no, I don't think I'm physically able. Somebody told me your baptistry was real steep, and I don't know how I could get down in there, and I don't know what to do about the ankle bracelet, and I'm up for probation in a month. I thought maybe I'd just try to wait, see if I get my ankle bracelet off, see if we could figure out somewhere that I could just kind of get in the baptistry. I said, don't worry about any of that. I said, you're not the first ankle bracelet we have had in our baptistry. They are waterproof. We have found that out. And number two, don't worry about getting in. I'll carry you down the steps if I need to. Okay, John's great. He said, can we get anybody stronger? I'm like, I can do it. But here was what was interesting. I said, the guy that does our Bible study is a great guy named Gary. And I said, wouldn't you like Gary to baptize? He said, I'd really like Gary to be in the baptistry with me. Yes. And one of our other ex-offenders who has an ankle bracelet was really involved. And I said, and wouldn't you like Joseph to baptize you or be there with you? And he said, yeah, I'd like that. So I go to Joseph, Gary, and we meet. He said, okay, John wants you to be baptized. I said, why don't, Gary, you want to do it? And Gary said, I can't. You know what God has done in my life. I was like, well, I know part of your story. I don't know. He said, you know, I have a debilitating speech fear. And I said, yeah, but you teach Bible class. He said, no, it took me 30 years to sit down in a class of offenders and talk about God. He said, when I was dating my wife, I couldn't even say, hey, I think I like you. Will you marry me? He said, I had to write things out. I can't read. I can't speak. And he said, the idea of getting up in front of 600 people and taking John's confession, I can't do it. I said, no problem, Joseph. You want to do? And Joseph said, I'm a brand new Christian. I'll freeze. I won't know what to ask. And I said, okay, will you guys get in the baptistry with John and support him? Yes, we can do that. And I said, okay, I'll be in there with him. So all four of us, the Sunday John's going to be baptized. We told our church, right after church, we're going to baptize John. Many of you have met him. Everybody gets excited. They're thrilled. We get ready. They're singing songs at the end of service. I tell John, lean on me backwards, and I back down our baptistry. And it is kind of like that. And the last thing my wife says, I'm getting ready to go back to the baptistry, she says, don't fall with John. If you're going to fall, push him to the rail and you go down. I'm like, honey, yeah, that's really not, okay. So I back John down, we all get in there. They're singing one of the contemporary great praise songs. They start to open the curtains of the baptistry, and we didn't mean to open it early. It just, somebody thought they were through, and they were starting the next verse. You know how that song, but they open the curtains, and there's this praise song, the whole congregation is singing, and John is standing there, and we kind of told him what we're going to do, and he starts to he wants to raise his hand and praise to God. And Joseph reached over and said, let me help you, and held his hand up. And John is just bawling. And so we're wiping his tears for him because he's hanging on with his good hand to the baptistry because he's unstable. We asked him what he believes about Jesus. He said that Jesus died for all of my sins. Baptized him into Christ. Congregation just erupts in a standing ovation for John because we're pretty celebratory about stuff. And John is just bawling. So we carry him out of the baptistry and set him down. He said, Steve, I'm so sorry. I cried so hard. And I said, hey, it's okay. Your sins were just wiped away. And he looked at me and said, Steve, you don't know how many sins I have. And I said, doesn't matter. They're all gone. And you, John, don't know how many sins. I just took his face in my hand and said, and you don't know, John, how many sins I have that God has forgiven me. And so by then I'm bawling, he's bawling. You're going, okay, that's a neat story. What was the news today that triggered that? Well, one night we're singing the journey class, taking prayer requests, and John says, I want y'all to pray for my daughter. I think I'm going to take a bus to San Angelo, about 90 miles away from Abilene. And he said, I'm going to see my daughter for the first time in 7 years. She is pregnant and she has cancer, ovarian cancer. And they're trying to get her to deliver the baby. And then they're going to try to take her ovaries out. Okay, we'll pray for that. Now, he hadn't seen his daughter. Some of you are thinking, well, that's what happens when you know why he hadn't seen his daughter in 7 years? When you're incarcerated and in and out of prison, and she is incarcerated and in and out of prison, the odds of seeing each other are not good. And so he went to see his daughter. They had a great visit. He came back and told us all about it. And so we started praying for his daughter, for her health, for her safe delivery, for it all to work out, for him to really be reconciled and get to visit with her. So John comes in one night and says, hey, Steve, guess what I've done? Okay, I don't know what. What have you done? And he said, I told my daughter if she wouldn't know about Jesus, you'd drive all the way down to San Angelo and talk to her. And I said, well, you know what? Marcia and I would love to go down and we would anytime talk to your daughter. So I thought so because you went and talked to that Russian lady. If you were here yesterday, you know Uliana's story. So I said, you're right. If we'll drive to Dallas, we'll certainly drive to San Angelo, and we would talk to your daughter about Jesus. So we've been praying. One of our Bible classes, because as our people come to Jesus, we try to transition them into our regular Bible classes. One of the Bible classes John had gone to had another man who had a stroke, and he's in a wheelchair. But he said, you think John would talk to me about life and Jesus? And he's a mature Christian. I said, John would love to be mentored by somebody that gets what he's going through. And so they became friends. This guy's in this Bible class. That Bible class decided what John's daughter needed was a baby shower. So you know what they did? They threw a shower without her being there in Abilene, Texas for a lady in San Angelo. Got a ton of diapers and onesies and I don't know what all. My wife was telling me, I'm just going, our grands are grown almost. I don't even know what you're talking about anymore, but good. And then they loaded up a van, put all that stuff in there, including a car seat. John wanted to buy it, so he borrowed money from 3 of us to buy a car seat. We all told him, forget it, don't pay us back. But he is about $5 a month, paying us all back. So, because he said, I want to buy the car seat for my daughter. One of our ministers goes with me, and one of our single ladies at church that works a lot in our journey class went with them. Because she said, I don't know, she's pregnant. I don't want her to be overwhelmed by these guys showing up and all this stuff, and I don't know how it'll be, so I'm going to go with them. Great. They go down there, and she is blown away by that. They come back, and he said, man, we found somebody in San Angelo that's a Christian that's going to go talk to her, and he's already called her, and we're praying for the baby, so we're praying a lot of us praying every day, but every time we got together, and my wife called me this afternoon to say John's daughter last night delivered a healthy baby. How great is our God? Is that not amazing? And it's just one of those things, man, John, boy. So, you never know when you talk to somebody, invite somebody, where that's going to lead. And so tonight we want to talk a little bit for the people that sometimes have a little issue with church. Now, I'm going to tell you right, every time I say that, the people that kind of lead church, elders, deacons, preachers, members that have been really active, they flinch. Okay, I don't know what you're going to say about nobody has a problem with our church. We're the only church in the world that nobody has a problem with. Everybody loves us. We never make a wrong decision, and we are all really good for you, and don't lie to me anymore. We're in church, okay? Some people have a lot of funny ideas about church and about Christians. For instance, there are believers out there that think, oh yeah, I know all about you Christians. You like to talk about it, you don't want to do it. You all talk a big game about helping people, but I have Christians go by me every day who don't even see me, don't help me, don't. And you know what? Sometimes that is exactly right. Sometimes we Christians hadn't always walked the way we talk. And sometimes they'll say, oh yeah, I know all about you Christians. I know your church, you're a bunch of rules. And everything that was fun, God said you can't do. And everything that's bad, God said you have to do. It's like, that's not how it works. But that's their perception. church is a bunch of rules. And you kind of, you want to be a Christian, come in here and do all this and do all that and don't do this and don't do that. And the don't list is way longer than the do list, but they're both really long and a bunch of rules. And sometimes when people say things like that to me, I say, I guess we sound like that sometimes, don't we? Yeah, that's not who we want to be. That's not who God didn't set up a group of people to follow a bunch of rules. He didn't. And they say, really? How do you know that? And I say, can I tell you a story? And the story I tell them is from Luke, the 10th chapter. And it is when someone said to Jesus, listen, I don't know, what do you think? I want to please God, so what's the one thing I got to do? What's the great thing I got to do? What's the big commandment? What's the biggie? Tell me, because everybody wants to find out, okay, I can't memorize all this. Just tell me the one thing I need to do. And the cool thing is, Jesus said, well, what do you think it is? And the guy says, well, the command we always learn is love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. The second, love your neighbors yourself. And when you read all the accounts, sometimes it says Jesus said that, sometimes they ask the guy. So if you're wondering about who we are and what we want to do, and you think that we're just a bunch of people that have a do's and don'ts list posted for you, if you want to be a Christian, be sure you do all these and don't do all these. You have missed the point. Jesus said, here it is. Here's the biggie. Here it all is. Love the Lord your God with all you have. Yeah, but what about all the rules and all that? It starts with love God. Because you know why? In fact, one of the accounts when Jesus said that, he said, on this hang all the law and the prophets. You cannot find anything Jesus ever wanted you to do or God wanted you to do or God asked you not to do. You can't find any of them that aren't wrapped up in love the Lord your God first. And second, love your neighbor as yourself. Everything, you think about everything you've ever thought God wanted you to do, and it'll either be about loving God or loving your neighbor. Every one of them. I defy you to find something God asked you to do and say, I found it and it has nothing to do with loving God or loving your neighbor. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. So when people say you guys are a bunch of rule makers, rule enforcers, either we have missed the point when we talk to them, or they have. So if you're visiting tonight and you're not a believer and you came because you're curious, I want to start by telling you, please understand, we're not a bunch of rule makers, rule keepers. One is, none of us are big enough to make the rules for life. None of us. And if you did my rules, it'd be great, except it wouldn't work. And none of us are going to keep all the rules anyhow. You know how people say you Christians are all a bunch of, boy, y'all heard this, okay? People have told you this. Or you're out there going, I can answer that for you, buddy. I don't come to this church, but I can tell you, bunch of hypocrites. Because when we give the impression that we're all about keeping all the rules, and then when you do that, guess what? Here, everybody keep all these rules, and then guess what? We don't keep them. We don't do them. We miss it. Sometimes, man, we don't do all the rules we want to do, and we mess up here. We don't. And so when they think we're rule keepers and they see us not keeping the rules, what do they think we are? Hypocrites. And when somebody says to me, you church people are all hypocrites, you know what I say? Oh, you do know us. We're not really hypocrites, but you know what? If you're talking about people that say, I ought to live this way, and sometimes I live this way, you have got us. You know us. I don't try to act like, hey, we're a bunch of perfect people. If you come to Royal Oak, as soon as you get good enough, you're welcome to be part of us. I love most of y'all, but I know a lot of y'all already. If we're counting who's here because of how good they are, okay, most of that section, you're out. I'm just going to tell you. Oh, you got to go with them. Don't laugh too quick. And don't you laugh either, because we're all, and I'll be the first one in line. I was preaching a sermon similar to this one time, and I said, because, in fact, all of us that are sinners, we ought to just hold up our hand and acknowledge it. And so I had a friend get up and he said, aren't you going to hold yours up? I'm like, yeah, I am. I'm the first one. Because you know what? We are. We're not perfect. We are forgiven. And there's a lot of difference in that. I live forgiven, and I'm trying to get better, but I don't. So when they say, you guys don't, that's right. Sometimes we don't. But we're trying with everything we have to focus on two things. Love God and love our neighbor. Now, there's always somebody. Here's another thing that hurts church, and I'm sorry if you've got this impression sometimes about church. There was a guy out there who wanted to justify himself. He wanted to live the way he wanted to live. Love God, love your neighbor. That could be pretty broad. Let me see if I can. Okay, Jesus, I've got it. Who's my neighbor? Because I have a certain way I want to live. And if I can just get you to say, then I can figure out when I'm exempt from serving somebody, who my neighbor is not, so I don't have to do. And you ever known those people that are always looking for what's the minimum I have to do? You know, tell me just what do I have to give? How many times do I have to come to church? Okay, those are rules, and when you start asking that question, you're missing the point of Jesus. Jesus didn't say, hey, I died, so you can go to church probably 90% of your life. And so if you'll just kind of figure up how many years you might live and multiply that by 52, and if you figure out 80% of that, and if you go to church every Sunday when you're young, you get a pass when you're old, it doesn't work like that. Jesus didn't call us to be sure we go to church most of the time, or didn't call us to figure out how much we have to, or, you know, I worked with college kids for years, the age-old college kid question. When I'm dating and we're not married, you know, and it's kind of a sex thing, how far can you go? And when they ask me, I'd always say, you know, I'd suggest about a mile away from campus. Other than that, don't. They'd go, what? I thought you meant how far. I was telling you distance. You know, you're asking the wrong question. Anytime you want the minimums. Jesus didn't say, hey, come to me, all of you who want to do as little as you can for me. But sometimes that's the impression we give to the world. So if you've had that impression, I'm sorry, this story is for us as much as it is to tell you what Jesus really does ask of us. See, here's why the guy wanted to justify himself. Who's my neighbor? Because, okay, I don't even know those people at the end of the block that just moved in. I don't know them, so I don't have to serve them. So that'll be okay because I really don't like them because I saw they're a teenager and I don't like them anyhow. So who's my neighbor? My road bends. Do I have to go around it? I can't even see that house. Are they my neighbor? I don't even know this guy's name. Is he my neighbor? Just tell me who I have to serve. Who is my neighbor that I have to do what you want me to do? And so this is why I love Jesus. So Jesus said, okay, I'm going to tell you. And he didn't give him a checklist of all the people. You know what he gave him? A story. Jesus told a story. And here in capsule form is the story. A guy's traveling down the road, and thieves jump him and beat him up and rob him and leave him for dead. You know, our world's a hard place. There are people that get emotionally, physically, mentally, and spiritually beat up every day. It is all around you. Look at our world and what happens in our world. You don't think you're not beat up a little bit when the doctor says, okay, you need to come in, I've got the test results. And you come in and sit down and he says, it's not good news. You don't think that somebody just didn't beat you up a little bit that way? But I just buried my husband last year. Yeah, you think that wasn't somebody hitting you right in the face with something? Man, I lost my job. I did everything I could and they fired me. And yeah, you don't think that's not a punch in the gut? Sure it is. Man, and you know, the drunk driver that came out and, man, the person that robbed your pension fund, the person that looked at you and looked down on you because you look different or act different. You don't think our world is not full of people getting beat up and robbed of all sorts of things? Because we live in a fallen, hard world. All the people doing all the bad stuff, and that doesn't even count what we do that's not good. Because some of us have contributed to a hard world. And so I think Jesus is going to make a really good point. Here's this guy. And you know what? We talked about this a little bit yesterday, but here's the thing I think interesting. I want to help you if you just really got a bad break. I mean, you're a good guy, and I like you, and you worked hard. Let me help you. I don't know. I think you probably went to work late, and I'm not sure you worked as hard as you should have, so maybe this whole thing's kind of your fault, so I really don't have to help you. You ever want to blame somebody? Whose fault is that? You did it to yourself, so I'm kind of released from helping you because you could have done better. Really? You had never had a time in your life when you could have done better? Ever had a time in your life when you didn't quite do what you should have done? Yeah. Maybe the point's not to go around trying to figure out who's to blame, but to figure out how we help in the name of Jesus. And so he talks about the religious guys. 2 religious guys came by. Probably, I used to say all the time as a preacher and an elder, and one day my wife pointed out to me, honey, you're a preacher and an elder. You shouldn't pray. I'm like, you're right. It was a deacon and a committee chair. I don't know who it was. I don't know. But there were a priest and a Levite. They came by and they saw him. And they went by on the other side. So I'm going to tell you, if you're here and you've been hurt by church, and you've been hesitant to find out about Jesus, hesitant to follow Jesus, don't really want to give in to Jesus because you've been hurt by church, I'm going to say this right up front. I am sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry if it was real. I'm sorry if the youth minister lied about you. I'm sorry if the preacher abused somebody you know. I'm sorry if the treasurer ran off with the money. I'm sorry if the hypocritical guy from church got drunk on Friday night and blindsided your teenager. I'm sorry about everything the church, I'm sorry about when the church ignored you when you needed them. I'm sorry if the church didn't help you when you were in trouble. I am sorry for everything we ever did because we are not perfect. We're not. We're just people trying to do better with Jesus. And sometimes we don't do as good as we should, and we are sorry. Man, you know, I'm telling you, if you've ever tried to say to a church person, hey, I got hurt by the church, and they jump down your throat, I'm sorry for the double hurt. Now, church members sometimes will say this to me, but Steve, it's in their mind. We didn't do it what we, you know what? You ever been hurt and then later found out it wasn't quite what you thought, but it didn't change how you got hurt? You know, oh, they didn't really mean that when they said, but it sure hurt and I felt it. Yeah. Sometimes we didn't mean to, but we hurt people. And sometimes maybe they were oversensitive and they heard it wrong, but you know what? They still got hurt. I never go into my wife and say, honey, I realize this hurt you. You're a little oversensitive. In our first year of marriage, I may or may not have tried that approach. I will just give you this marriage advice. Don't do that. I never go in and say, listen, you're not hearing, or I've never done this. If you'll just calm down. But we do that with people say, I got hurt by church. Well, just calm down. You know, you're not. You know what? We have hurt people. We didn't always mean to. But we are not perfect people. We are forgiven people. So if you've been hurt by church, I'm going to tell you, I'm sorry. And you know, if you come to church here, if you're visiting, you're looking, you say, okay, well, I need a church that never is going to hurt me. I'm not going to make that promise. I'd love to I will promise this. We won't do it on purpose. I think I can promise that. Most of us that try to follow Jesus don't intentionally hurt people because that's not who we want to be. Sometimes we do, and I'm sorry for that. These church people saw him and went around the other side. They were busy. They had an appointment. They were smart, not going to fall into the trap of some guy laying on the side of the road trying to get. I don't know what it was that they want. I don't know if they just so used to people beat up in life, they see him and walk right past them. You ever seen anybody tear up at church? And you go home and over lunch, you say to your wife, wonder what they were crying about. You know, instead of going over and saying, oh, I love you, you okay? And maybe they won't tell you. Maybe they will. You know, sometimes we look right at people and we just don't see them. We don't. So I'm sorry for that. And then Jesus talks about the one person that did help. Now he's talking to a bunch of Jewish people. And the person that he's going to use as the illustration for who really helps is a Samaritan. And Jews and Samaritans did not get along. They hated each other. Lots of reasons go into that. Ask somebody sometime to tell you all the reasons why Jews and Samaritans get along, but they didn't. I will tell you this much this quick. God was always having to tell his people, you're not following me, I'm going to send you into captivity. When you learn to do better, I'll bring you back. Just like sometimes we Christians have to do in church. We got to do better about, so let's work on it. Well, sometimes God would help them learn to do better by taking them into captivity. And when he did, the ones that went off into captivity and were slaves off in a foreign land, They would eventually, God would free them. They'd come back home. And here's the problem you had. You had people that didn't go into captivity staying behind. And so we did this exercise yesterday, so some of you know the answers. We're going to see how honest everybody else is. So if you're taking slaves, do you take weak slaves or strong slaves into captivity? Yeah, you take the strong ones, so who do you leave behind? The weak ones, okay. You take smart or dumb slaves. So you're taking strong, smart people, you're leaving dumb, weak people, okay. Do you take young or old? Well, yeah, young, so you've got lots of life. So you take young, smart, strong, you leave behind weak, old, dumb. And just for grins, if you're sitting by your wife, guys, don't answer this, let them answer. Do you take good-looking slaves or ugly? Yeah, some of y'all going, can I answer that? You take the good-looking ones, of course you do. So you're taking good-looking, young, strong, smart. You're leaving behind old, dumb, weak, ugly. Now, a lot of y'all, I can see it in your eyes, you're going, so would I have been taken or would I have not? Don't ask yourself that question. Do not ask yourself that question. But here's what happens to that. So you've already got a little bit of inferiority complex. And while everybody else is in captivity, you're back here at home and all that occupying army, I don't care if you're old, dumb, weak, and ugly. After a while, you look pretty good. And they say, have sex with me. Say, no, I'm not going to. Whap, slap, bam. Have sex with me. Okay. And you know what happens when you have sex? Okay, y'all are old enough to know this. Really, you are. What happens when you have sex? If you have, eventually you have babies. That's right. That's how you get babies. Those of y'all that still believe in the stork, see me afterward. We'll discuss it. But yeah, that's how you have babies. And so, wait a minute. The Jews left behind and the occupying army had babies. What do you call people from two races? Half-breeds. And so you finally get back from slavery. You come back and say, what went on here while we were gone? Who are all these little kids? How could you have done that? Well, you don't know how it was. You don't know how hard it was here. And they hated each other. So much so that if you were in Judea in the south that was heavily Jewish, and you wanted to go to Galilee in the north that was heavily Jewish, and Samaria sits in the middle, and the river Jordan runs beside it, you would walk up through Judea, you would get to the boundary, the border, and you would cross outside the river Jordan and go up outside of Samaria till you got in Galilee and you would cross back in because you wouldn't let your sandal set foot in Samaria. That's how much they hated each other. And Jesus says, and then a Samaritan came by. Oh, what did he do? Beat him up more? What did he do? Spit on him? I mean, he didn't even see him probably. And then Jesus tells him this. You know what the Samaritan did? He saw the man and had compassion. We Jesus followers, man, we want to help you because we hurt, because I don't know what your situation is, but many of us have been where you are. We have. Man, if you think life's beating you up, we get it. Your marriage in the toilet, lots of us here have had marriages in the toilet. Man, my kids don't even talk to me, and I'm ashamed to say I've hit my kid. You don't think anybody in here has ever yelled at their kid, hit their kid? Yeah, but I mean, you guys don't all look like a bunch of alcoholics. No, because we're Jesus people, and he's healed us. Here's what we passionately believe, that our God makes alcoholics sober, and sexually immoral people pure, and mean people sweet, and greedy people generous. Our God does that. And you know how I know that? Because I know how some of us were. And I know what Jesus has done. So when you think we're just a bunch of people who want to keep a bunch of rules, no, we're a bunch of people who want to do what Jesus did. We want to love people. And so the Samaritan sees him, and his heart hurts for him. I don't know if he thought, man, I don't know if this is a trap or if this is real, but you know what? That guy needs help. And he goes over and he binds up his wounds. He puts him in his animal. He takes him into the next city. It takes him some time. It takes him some money. It takes him some effort. So please hear us. If you've said, I don't think you church people walk the way, yes, we do. We invest our time and we invest our energy and we invest our money in helping people and caring for people because we do care, because Jesus cared for us. He loved us, and we're going to try to love you. And if you think, I don't want to hear any more of this church stuff, I'm still going to love you. And if you run out the door, I'm still going to love you. And if you say, I'm never going back and hear that guy preach, I'm still going to love you. I'll be a little hacked off, but no, I won't. I'm kidding. I'll still love you. I will. And so will all of us, because that's who we are. Takes him to the next town, puts him in an inn to recover, says, here's some money to take care of him, and then lets him run his credit card. Well, I guess he didn't really run his credit card, but he did say, put it on my bill when I come back. You know, we Christians take extravagant risks like that. So, man, if you say, you don't know, does God really want somebody like me? As messed up as I am, and I don't know what all your baggage is, but you won't have any more baggage than we've all brought to Jesus. There's a lot of baggage being carried into this assembly and dumped at the feet of Jesus. And he took care of it for us. He picked it up for us. He healed us. And so we're telling you, we will do whatever it takes to help you find the Jesus that'll take care of your baggage. He has. If you say, John's situation, you know how bad I drink. Well, you think you're the only one in this? Let me introduce you to some of my friends who were alcoholics, maybe who still struggle with. We've got to be those people. And so when all that's told, he looks at the guy that wanted to kind of justify himself, and he said, so who's the neighbor? Well, I guess this guy that helped him. And you know what Jesus said then? Go do the same. So for all of you that have wondered, is church really worth it? Do I really want to be part of this? I don't know. I've got all these images of who you people really are. You just heard in a capsule who we're the people that want to love God with everything we have, and we want to love our neighbor extravagantly. And we do that because of the Jesus who loved us enough to die for us. So if you're wondering about this whole Jesus thing, I'm telling you, it's not about do this and don't do that. And it's not about, hey, memorize all the rules and then follow all the rules and you'll be okay. It only takes 70% to pass it. We're not asking you to come do a bunch of rules. We're not even asking you to come act a certain way. We're asking you to give your heart and your life to Jesus because that's what we have done. So do we do it all perfectly all the time? Nope, sure don't. Do we show up here sometimes hurt and bleeding a little bit from the work? Yes, we do. And that's why we come together to heal ourselves, because you do not have to do life alone. When you come to Jesus, you get him and you get all his people. Messed up, imperfect, struggling, trying to figure it out, trying to do better, but we are going to love him and love you till he takes us home. So if you're here tonight and you're wondering about this whole Jesus thing, I'm begging you to talk to one of us. We'll be singing a song in a minute. I'll be going up and down the aisle, flag me down. Peter will be down here. Come down and talk to him. Catch somebody around you. Just look at somebody who looks like they have a face that loves you and say, would you talk to me about this whole Jesus thing? If you've heard it and you say, okay, I'm in. I'm imperfect too, but if you guys are trying, I'll try with you. Can I do this? We would love to see you born again tonight and have your sins washed away and be raised to a new life out of baptism. We would love to do that. And I'm just going to say to the believers, man, if you're in here and you're going, well, I'm kind of part of the reason they think that, because I really kind of, you know what? It's okay. If you're struggling with your Jesus walk and kicking your addictions and you need help, that's why we're here. You can't come tell any of us anything that's going to shock us or make us not love you, because we have been there and been healed by Jesus. So if we can help you in any way, catch one of us right now while we sing, or find one of us afterward and say, please talk to me about Jesus, because nothing makes us happier because he saved us. Let's stand and sing together.